Hello. This is number one of what will be six podcasts that will take you through the key features about Nazi policy towards the Jews, 1933 to 39. So this is taking you up to the outbreak of World War II. Okay, so there's the usual mind map and the key features that we will be covering are this section here, Nazi views. Okay, so just a few sort of general pointers before we get into the details about what the Nazis thought about the Jewish race. I suppose the first thing to emphasise is one key word, which is this. Okay, hatred of Jews is called I do apologise, my pen isn't as effective. That's ANTI hyphen capital S E M. That is an M. Anti-Semitism. Okay, is Jew hatred. Okay, it is the act of hating Jews, or anti-Semitic is the form of behaviour. And the point, just to understand, is anti-Semitism was not something that was just German, and it wasn't something that was just the Nazis in the 1920s and 1930s. Okay, anti-Semitism, hatred of Jews, was a feature across the whole of Europe, in all countries, including Britain, and also France. France in particular, in the 1930s, the same time as Hitler, there was a strong strand of Jew hatred going on. And also it had been going on for a long time across the whole of Europe. Jews originally were a group of people who came from Palestine, who had banished, which is now called Israel, or at least part of Palestine is now Israel, and the Jews had been banished 2,000 years ago in the time of Christ. So they were a group of people who did not have their own homeland, and they were scattered throughout the whole of Europe. So every European country had Jews. Germany, out of a population of about 40 million, Germany had 500,000. That's 500,000 Jews. Okay, that in the bigger picture is actually quite a small proportion of the German population. That's approximately 1% of Germans were Jewish Germans. Okay. The other thing to understand about them is that they were what we call assimilated. Okay, the majority of German Jews, as were French Jews, as were British Jews, were assimilated. Now, what does assimilated mean? Assimilated means that they were fully absorbed into the life of the nation. They saw themselves as Jews of that nation. Okay, so the 500,000 German Jews, that's 1 out of every 100, they did not see themselves as being particularly different. They spoke the German language, they carried the German passport, they fought for Germany in World War I, they were heroes, they were patriotic, they were proud of their country, and their family had been living in Germany for up to 2,000 years, so they saw themselves as very much as German. And the other thing to really understand is that the vast majority of other Germans were not anti-Semitic. Most Germans had a Jew who was a neighbour, who was a friend, and they got on with them, and they did not see them as being different. Just as today, the vast majority of people do not have racist views. Okay, so there was nothing particularly distinctive or different about Germany and about anti-Semitism before Hitler came along. So then Hitler came along. Okay, well, anti-Semitism was not new. There always had been a narrow group of people in Germany, as in France, as in Britain, as in Russia, and all these countries who were anti-Semitic. So anti-Semitic ideas have been written down, and the key sort of argument was that the Jews, lacking their own country because they didn't have their own country, they had lost it 2,000 years ago, were plotting. They were jealous of other countries. They were jealous of the fact that the German people had their own country, for example, and so they were conspiring to bring about the downfall of nations. That sort of idea, and in the 19th century, a particular strain of anti-Semitism was that the Jews were a racial inferior. They were vermin. If you look at this picture here, that was a typical poster that was produced by the Nazis. But to be accurate, if you went back 50 years before Hitler, there were other Germans who produced similar posters, and they depicted the Jews as almost being like a form of bacteria, a strain of blood that should not be mixed with the German blood. So that's a picture from a Nazi propaganda film called The Eternal Jew, Der ewige Jude, the Eternal Jew. Now, when Hitler came along and the Nazi Party was formed after World War I, what Hitler did, which again was nothing different, it had happened before, but Hitler latched onto the fact that a minority of Germans disliked Jews, and he used Jews as what we call scapegoats. So I'm just writing down the key words for you here. Okay, so Jews as scapegoats. Okay, now a scapegoat is basically a convenient group of people to blame for the problems that the nation is experiencing. Now, after World War I, of course, there was massive unemployment. The country was in an economic crisis, and of course, the Treaty of Versailles humiliated and punished Germany, and Germany lost land, and of course, Germany had been defeated in war. So there was a lot of pain in Germany in 1919. And Hitler, as a politician, forming a new party, like other extreme right-wing parties, needed to find a way to get support. And there's lots of ways of getting support. He can promise that if he comes to power, he will create jobs, etc., etc. But one of the ways in which Hitler tried to win support was to treat Jews as a scapegoat. In other words, he blamed them for causing these awful problems that Germany was experiencing. And he said that these minority of Germans, the 500,000 who are Jews, are deliberately doing this because they are jealous of Germany. They are trying to bring Germany down. So Hitler very conveniently looked at, for example, the politicians who signed the Treaty of Versailles, and he looked at the communist leaders, like, for example, Liebknecht and Luxemburg, and he saw that many of them were Jews, and for Hitler that was proof that the Jews were a dangerous race. And Hitler, throughout the 1920s, in his campaign for power, frequently mentioned Jews. He was anti-Semitic in his tone. Now, there is no evidence at all, absolutely none at all, that Hitler in the 1920s, as a politician who was campaigning for power, had devised a plan to murder the Jewish race if he were to become leader of Germany. There's no evidence, even in Hitler's head, that he was thinking along that lines. He hated Jews. They were a convenient scapegoat. Certainly he knew that if he came to power, he would introduce policies that would reduce them to being second-class citizens, but there was no evidence that he wanted to murder them at that stage. That is an idea that came into his head at a later stage. Okay, so those are the key terms. So the Nazis, just going back to this key point here, the Nazis had a racial hierarchy. A convenient way to sort of look at this is if you imagine a pyramid, and the pyramid represents the 40 million Germans. Well, in Hitler's view, society was very, very definitely ordered into layers, and the people at the top, the smaller groups at the top, or the people at the top, were the superior people. Okay, so at the top, were the Germans with pure Aryan blood, often distinguished by blonde hair, blue eyes. Not necessarily. Hitler believed they were beneath the surface, beneath the surface of the skin. They would eventually come through with breeding, with crossbreeding. Hitler himself did not have blonde hair or blue eyes, but he said he claimed he was an Aryan, and he claimed that the key feature of being an Aryan, was the strong leadership qualities carried in the blood. Then you've got the other white races who were also superior, but not as superior as the Aryans. Then you've got, beneath that, you start to talk about the Untermenschen, or the subhumans, with the Slavs, who were mainly Eastern European, the Poles, the Romanians, Bulgarians, and of course Russians. Were Slavs, and for Hitler, we're now moving into almost a different form of animal. They were seen to be sort of animals, not real humans. And at the very bottom of the hierarchy, you have Europe's Jews. Now, as I say, there were only 500,000 Jews in Germany, but the more east you move into the Slavic countries like Poland, there were 3.5 million Jews. You move to Russia, there were more than 5 million Jews in Russia, and so on and so forth. But the Jews were seen as being the very lowest form of the racial pyramid. Okay, we use that word hierarchy. It's like a food chain. It's a pecking order. It's a chain of superiority. Mixed into that lower order, the groups that Hitler really despised, the Jews are obviously a key feature, but also other racial types such as black people and gypsies. Okay, when we talk about the death camps of World War II, we will mention the fact that at Auschwitz, for example, many of the people who died in Auschwitz were gypsies, often a forgotten victim of the Nazi Holocaust. Okay, so those are the key features of Nazi views on race. The key thing in an answer is to use those terms that I've written down there, really remember the fact that the Nazis were unique, that only 1 in 10 Germans were Nazis, most Germans were not anti-Semitic, and most Germans were not Jews. They were only, remember, 1% of the population. Okay, about 500,000 out of more than 14 million. Okay, that's that. If you go on to the next podcast, which will be about the national community. Thank you.